Hi, Olivia. Thank you so much for getting a reading with me. This energy right now is pretty intense. But what we're going through is something that we've never gone through, and we'll never go through this again. But this year is definitely going to be character building. And I wanted to take some extra time to take you through what's happening in your chart because there's so many things happening at once. And we're about to come into some pretty intense energy as retrograde season begins. But I'm going to take you back through until like the end of 2019 when this really began to intensify for you, this energy that's impacting your ascendant. And so your ascendant at 28 degrees of Aries. You've been going through Uranus transiting in your first house since about 2017, 2018. And so that in itself has been monumentally transformative, a complete re-identification of the self. As Pluto and Saturn have met together in Capricorn, it began to make a square to your ascendant. And so you've had Pluto's at 24 degrees right now in Capricorn, making a square to your ascendant. And Saturn has been square your ascendant since about, really intensely since around Christmas time. So as Saturn squares your ascendant, you go through a complete restructuring of your self-identity. Saturn, because he can be oppressive, he can make us feel uncertain or limited or make us have to second guess ourselves. What Saturn wants us to do is do things that he wants us to build things that stand the test of time. So Saturn will keep showing us where there's cracks in our foundation and where we're not being practical enough, where we need to be more efficient. And he'll keep knocking us down until we learn how to do things in an efficient way that is lasting. Pluto breaks us down in a way that he shows us the darker aspects of ourselves, the power struggles, where we're giving our power away, where our fears reside. I think of Pluto energy as like the movie It. It's like all of our deepest fears, all of like the darkest, scariest parts of ourselves that we need to face and then reclaim and rescue those parts of ourselves. Saturn and Pluto are never usually together in the same sign. They haven't been together in the same sign since 1983 when they were in Libra together. Them coming together in Capricorn set off this complete breakdown of our structure of power within us as a collective. And as that happens, it's making a square to your ascendant. So you're like going through this forced transformation of how you interact with the world. Like our ascendant is our first response to the world. So that is changing for you. Jupiter is now joining this Pluto and Saturn energy, and Jupiter is now beginning to square your ascendant. And so this is where your beliefs come in. Jupiter conjunct Pluto now for us as a collective, and Jupiter expands whatever it touches. Jupiter in itself is this expansive energy of our philosophical understanding, our higher mind. And as Jupiter is in Capricorn, the last time Jupiter was in Capricorn was 2008. And that was the last time we had a recession because Jupiter is so expansive and Jupiter is like, believes anything's possible. But Capricorn energy is very limiting. It's like there's not enough. You have homework to do. You're in debt. You're doing it wrong. Like Saturn is a very like survival only. So as Jupiter is in Capricorn, we do need to make do with less. But as Jupiter conjuncts Pluto, it's expanding this breakdown of our system. And as Jupiter squares your ascendant, it's this breakdown of your old beliefs, the things that you cling to that shape your life. Our beliefs are what allow us to receive. If we believe we deserve a good life, we receive that. If we believe that this is all we deserve, that's all we receive. And so we have to re-identify our belief structures and allow ourselves to see through like outworn dogma or things that like ideologies that no longer resonate with us as a collective, but as you as an individual going through this, the ideologies you hold about yourself and your own sense of self-identity. Mars has joined the party and was in Capricorn as well and just entered into Aquarius. So Mars has been squaring your ascendant as well. So that's Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn, and Mars. All like a square is a buildup of pressure, a provocation, this like a thorn in your side, and in cardinal energy between your individuality and the stability in your life. And this is happening between your 10th house and, well, Saturn just moved into your 11th house. So this is like your career, you on the world stage, and how you impact the collective and how the collective impacts you. And then to your ascendant and your first house, your sense of self. So as Mars squares your ascendant, Mars is how we take action. Mars is how we go forward. It's how we act on our impulses. And Mars in Aquarius wants to do things its own way. The interesting thing is Mars and Saturn connect because Saturn is so limiting. This actually can give us a sense of stability to our actions, but it also can make us feel really limited in our actions. And hey, we're all very limited in our actions now, being forced to quarantine ourselves. And as Mars squares your ascendant, it can show you like a buildup of pressure, but it could also, with Saturn there, you can go through a change of how you transform the way that you take action, so there is more stability. And as Saturn moves into Aquarius, this is us finding unconventional ways to find stability. And so you're going through that within your sense of self. Collectively, we've been going through the nodes of the moon within Cancer and Capricorn this whole year. And so you had the South Node cross over your midheaven, right? Like when we ended out last year. So the South Node is like a draining energy similar to Saturn. And the North Node is like a beneficial energy, like a Jupiter energy. So you had the North Node transit over your IC. So this year was beneficial more in your home life, where there was a lot of release and letting go in your career life. And collectively, we've been going through the release. And your Neptune is right conjunct your midheaven. So you went through the South Node, went over your natal Neptune. This is like letting go and releasing like old spiritual beliefs or old. The South Node is, I say old. The traditional ways of doing things, that our idea of the only way to get what we need in life is by being part of the system, being part of the 9-to-5, being part of the patriarchal way of life. Where the North Node in Cancer in your 4th house this year was like telling you need to re-identify who you are through your emotions, allow yourself to feel emotionally secure, focus as much on how you feel and how you intuit the world around you as much as you have focus on the structure and the stability of your life. And because for you, the South Node right now is transiting in your 9th house. This, again, the 9th house is the house of Sagittarius and Jupiter. It's letting go of old beliefs or old ways of doing and operating. We're about to go through some really heavy energy as a collective and a lot of retrogrades. So I just wanted to make sure I don't talk too fast because there's a lot of things going to be happening. So I'm just going to do one thing at a time. The nodes of the moon are changing signs in May. And the North Node of the moon is going to enter into 29 degrees of Gemini. So the nodes of the moon transit in reverse. in reverse. So we're going to go from Cancer back into Gemini. So at 29 degrees of Gemini. And your natal Venus is at 28 degrees of Gemini. So the North Node is going to be transiting over your natal Venus. And your Venus is in retrograde. And we're going to be going through a Venus retrograde in Gemini for a while. But as the North Node transits over your natal Venus, this is the time, this only happens once every 19 years. So I want to say that before I go forward. I'm going to rewind for a second. The last time the nodes of the moon were in Capricorn and Cancer at this degree was when September 11th happened. So this is a 19-year cycle that we're closing out. And I find it interesting that what we're going through as a collective, this COVID-19 PSYOP, restructuring of us as a collective and understanding the power dynamics in our life. And as the South Node goes into Sagittarius and the North Node goes into Gemini, collectively, we're all going to be seeing through and like releasing our attachment to like old dogma or things that we're told. Like our beliefs are going to change, and for you, as this is happening on your natal Venus, this is like our Venus is like what we find valuable. It's what we find beautiful. It's how we beautify. It's our aesthetics, our creativity. It's our money. It's our sense of self-worth. It's our value. It's how we show affection. All of those things are going to be getting an influx of North Node energy, which is like this beneficial time of like renewal. As this is happening at the same time, so Venus just entered into Gemini. Venus is going to be at 5 degrees of Gemini and be opposed to your natal moon in Sagittarius on early April 9th, I believe. And then Venus is going to go to 21 degrees of Gemini, almost touching your natal Mercury, and then retrograde back to 5 degrees and oppose your moon again. And because your sun is in Gemini at 13 degrees, now at 9, your sun is at 9 degrees of Gemini and your moon is at 5 degrees of Gemini. So your sun and your moon are both going to be transited by Venus 3 times between now and August. So Venus is going to cross it once, retrograde back, and then go back again. So Venus just entered Gemini yesterday, and Venus is going to be there until August. And so this whole time, that's going to happen for you in your second house. The second house is the house of Venus. It's the house of Taurus. It's the house of our values. It's what we earn. It's what we own. It's how we value ourselves. So that for you is going through this complete, that in itself, Venus retrograding in your second house, a complete restructuring and a overhaul, a renewal, a review of the value of your life, what you find valuable, and how you earn your money and what you do with the money you earn. Your sun being in your second house, this is your sense of self-identity, how you illuminate, how you shine, how you allow yourself to grow. And this is also where the apex of your yod is, where your sun is. And so Venus is going to cross over your yod point 3 times. And as this is happening in your second house, in opposition to your 8th house, in your moon in your 8th house, when we go through a Venus opposition to our moon, we rebalance like our sense of emotional transformation in how we allow ourselves to re-identify our values. We no longer fucking fuck with certain people in our lives. We no longer like cling to like old outdated patterns. We do all these things so we can find a deeper sense of emotional security in healthier ways that we like Venus, when Venus touches our moon in an opposition, oppositions are not as provoking as squares. They're conflicting though. So Venus in opposition to your moon, you're like, I like that, but it doesn't feel good. Or that feels good to me, but I know that you're no good for me. Or like, I really, like, if I ate that cupcake right now, that really would make me feel emotionally secure, but like, then I would end up feeling bad about it. Like this, like, push-pull. And so when we go through an opposition in transit, we just go through a reevaluation of what we need to feel emotionally secure and then how we are able to find that. And your natal Mars is in Pisces. And since Gemini is mutable water, Gemini is mutable air, and Pisces is mutable water, this Venus is going to square your Mars. And when we have Venus square Mars transit, and your Mars is at 5 degrees of Pisces. So this is like the exact, that is so interesting. This is the exact point that Venus is going to retrograde back to, and your moon and your Mars are both at 5 degrees of mutable signs. So this Venus is going to opposition your moon and square your Mars. And so a revaluing of the actions you take and how you go about getting your emotional needs met. And Venus retrograde in Gemini as a whole for everyone is centered around us reevaluating how we communicate and the things that we are able to integrate, like the duality that we're able to integrate within our ability to connect as a society. Because I feel like we're just going through this overhaul of actualizing the power that we have within our voice, and how, as we go through this complete power structure, and how important it is for us to value our own voice, the value of our voice, like Venus in Gemini. So as this is happening, your Neptune, and so first of all, okay, so Neptune be hanging out in Pisces. This is where Mercury's been. So last year and this year, we've had Mercury in Pisces for over 60 days. Usually Mercury's in a sign for like 18 to 30 days. Last year and this year, we had Mercury retrograde in Pisces, and Mercury right now is still in Pisces. So collectively, our heads are still in this place of like uncertainty and fantasy. And if there was ever a time where you could convince, Neptune in the positive is spirituality, and it dissolves boundaries and allows us to connect on a spiritual level. However, Neptune can delude us or allow us to victimize ourselves or see things be able to, like Neptune rules over the media and how it gets imagery, and just how imagery and allowing imagery to manipulate us emotionally, because Pisces is very emotional and we can feel victimized or create narratives of things, or like believe narratives. So that's happening collectively. So because Neptune is a collective planet, when we go through outer planet transits, the universal becomes personal. So as Neptune is transiting over your natal north node, and Venus is transiting, or Mercury is transiting over your natal north node, this is activating your soul's purpose. This is activating your north node in Pisces in your 12th house. This is you accessing spirit, being able to take your south node in Virgo in your 6th house. South node and Virgo in the 6th house, you came into this life knowing how to be a healer, how to be beholden to helping others and assisting others. And in this life, learning how to master your spirit, learning how to understand yourself from a soul perspective and connect with the other side and not get caught up in being of too much of service to others. Be of service to your spirit. And as Neptune transits over your north node and Mercury does, this is like important communications coming through you subconsciously at this time. And as Nothing ever fucking happens just one thing at a time. Everything's always happening in motion in relation to our natal planets. And so as Neptune is transiting over your north node, Neptune is making a sextile to your Jupiter. This is being able to access the spiritual understanding and being able to ground in it, like Jupiter in Taurus. So I wanted to tell you about your first house and your seventh house too. I want to finish talking about the transits first, because this energy of Saturn squaring your ascendant. Saturn's going to go retrograde. So let's talk about these retrogrades that we got coming up. Venus is going to retrograde from May 13th to June 25th. Jupiter is going to retrograde from May 14th to September 12th. So Jupiter is going to start off squaring your ascendant, and then it's going to go back into Capricorn more, and then going to begin to square your ascendant again right around Christmas time. Saturn is going to start its retrograde on May 11th. So May 11th, May 13th, and May 14th. So right in the beginning of May, everything, so like right now, all the planets are direct. So all the planets are direct, and we're still like, so as all the planets begin to go retrograde, it's like we're going to be like pulled back into like this retrospective, like pulling us back into the past to reevaluate and re-understand. And so as Saturn goes retrograde back from Aquarius back into Capricorn, going to start to square your ascendant. So you're going to go through Saturn square your ascendant 3 times between now and December. And on December 21st of 2020, Jupiter and Saturn are exactly going to conjunct and be squaring your ascendant. But this December 21st, this is closing out the December 21st cycle of the Mayan calendar from 2012. And the last time that we had Venus retrograde in Gemini was in 2012. And we had Venus retrograde in Gemini in 2004. We go through it 8-year cycles with Venus retrograde. But the 2012 closing out, like this like culmination point of Jupiter and Saturn meeting on the 21st of December. And as they reconnect, like Jupiter and Saturn coming together is like us being able to like solidify and find stability in this new belief. And like as they come together in Aquarius, this is like us being able to like be innovative and take things, but it's going to take up until like December, this like grueling character building initiation and seeing beyond the constructs of the patriarchal system and reintegrating like divine feminine energy and reintegrating our matriarchal history of our connection with spirit and our connection with nature, and allowing ourselves to see the truth of like our inherent power and how paying attention to our intuition and our values and being able to communicate them is what's going to help us as a society, but also like help us as individuals. And for you, as like this whole time between like now and August, your sun and your moon being activated, your Venus being activated, this is all your personal planets, and your Mars, like this is all your energy. Like this, what's happening collectively is aligned to activate and remind you who you are individually of the powerful force of nature that you are. I want to talk to you about your first house and your seventh house in your chart, because when I looked at your chart again today, I noticed that you had interceptions. And so an interception happens when you have a house with a sign in it that doesn't begin or end the house cusp. So your first house begins in Aries and it ends in Gemini. So all of this Taurus energy in your first house is considered intercepted. And that's where your Jupiter is. And wherever we have interceptions, whatever sign and house is in opposition to our interception is also intercepted. So your 7th house begins in Libra and ends in Sagittarius. So your Scorpio is intercepted. So your Pluto is intercepted. So having the most basic way to put this is because Jupiter is our beliefs. It's how we believe anything is true, anything is possible. With Jupiter intercepted and in your first house, there can be a lack of self-belief in yourself. And then in the 7th house, Pluto intercepted, this is our power. And then the 7th house is our partnerships, the power dynamics within your relationships, or knowing your personal power within your relationships is part of your karmic struggle. In Taurus and Scorpio is our completion energy. Because the house begins in Aries and Libra, and this is cardinal energy, and this is fixed energy. Because the house begins in Aries and Libra, there's no problem initiating projects or initiating motion. It's the completion and the finishing and the belief that you have the power to do that is what is intercepted in your chart. And I'm put together an email for you, some written information so you can read more into interceptions, because this is something I learned. I had interceptions in my chart, and I was like, oh, that makes a whole hell of a lot of sense. And just add another added layer of what I'm working through karmically and my behavioral patterns. And so maybe that will give you some insight into just how, and they say we work through our intercepted houses through what's duplicated. And so what's duplicated for you, your 2nd house begins in Gemini, and your 2nd house also, and then your 3rd house begins in Gemini. And then your 8th house begins in Sagittarius, and your 9th house begins in Sagittarius. So your Sagittarius and your Gemini is considered duplicated. And so communication and travel and being able to communicate higher ideas or your higher mind is what will help you work through your interceptions. And so it's just another interesting dynamic to help us figure out the best way to maximize our potential. So I hope that you enjoyed your reading, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and best of luck through this time. Hopefully we will all be able, I don't think we'll ever go back to normal. We're inventing a new normal. We're rewriting tradition. And I know that you have so much creativity and gifts to share inspirationally with everyone. And I look forward to see how we all transform into our greatest potential through the challenges we're about to face. So best of luck to you, Olivia. Take care.